Morning. Bottom of 3b, second to last line. When we spoke in the previous brisa, we spoke about the first witness. What was that? That's the witness of seclusion. Eidus Achroina, the last witness, which is the testimony that an Eid Echad, a single witness, is believed to carry through Eidus Tumah. This is the testimony of Tumah. Okay, and this gets to the subject. Now we get to the subject of most of today. The Kamashir stira. How long is the length of time of seclusion? So the Gemara gives three measurements: Kedei Tumah, Kedei Bia, Kedei Hara. The shear of the measurement, the length of time it takes for a person to commit a carnal act. Kedei Bia is another use of sexual intercourse, and Kedei Hara is the initial act of intercourse. Okay. And how long does that take? Kedei Kafas Dekel, length of time it takes to walk around a tree, specifically a palm tree. So it's not a redwood or something. Okay, now why exactly does bamboo? I don't know. Why exactly does the Bryce have to give three words that effectively all mean intercourse? We'll get to that in a moment. Okay, this is different Rabbi Shmuel. This is the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Lazar Omer, Kedei Mezigas Hakais, the amount of time it takes to pour a cup. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Kedei L'shtoisa, the amount of time it takes to drink it. Ben Azi Omer, Ben Azi says Kedei Litzles Be'ah, the amount of time it takes to roast an egg. Rabbi Kiva Omer, Kedei L'goyma, the amount of time it takes to swallow an egg. Rabbi Yehudah ben Beseira Omer, Kedei L'gmoya Sholosh Beitz Mzuach Arzu, to swallow three eggs one after another. Rabbi Lazar ben Yirmiyah Omer, Kedei Likshar Gardei Nima, the amount of time it takes to tie the ropes of a ship. I believe that's what Gardei Nima, or Gardei Nima is the loom.
It takes a weaver to tie a string.
Yeah, it's to connect the strings of the loom when you're connecting material. Ben Pinchas Omer, Kadesha Tosh Yellow Terpia Little Kisim. The amount of time it takes to pull out a what do they call those stuff? The stuff that's stuck in between your teeth.
Splinter. Well, they call it a splinter.
Right? Yeah, kisim means a splinter, but it means it's stuck between the teeth.
Yeah, stuck between your teeth.
The amount of time it takes to take out a loaf of bread from a basket. Even though there's no proof that that's the amount of time it takes, there is sort of a hint of this, because the verse says, there's a relationship between Isha Zaina, a promiscuous woman, and a kikar lechem, a loaf of bread. Okay. And we'll discuss that pasuk in more length in a few minutes. Okay, Kol Hani Lamali. Why does it need to say all these three words? Tuma, Bia, Hara. Tuma again is typically used in the context of a carnal act. Bia is direct reference to intercourse, and Hara is the initial action of intercourse.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
How long is it supposed to take to remove a loaf of bread from a basket?
3 seconds.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So now the Gemara's point is going to be as follows: that
yeah, I mean, like
It was just a question.
yeah, all these things seem to be quite good. So the Gemara is explaining. So if a person has to consider a potential nightstand, obviously there's a certain process how things go before like I said yesterday, otherwise they'll call the police on you. And therefore it's, in order to seduce a woman, it's not just the act itself.
Right.
There's a process of hartzah. You have to seduce her before she'll sleep with you. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so the Gemara says tzrichi, it's necessary. The itana kedei tuma, if it would have said the amount of time it takes for a carnal act, havamini kedei tuma ve'artzusa, I would think it's the carnal act plus the seduction that needs to happen beforehand. Kamash Malan, therefore the Bryce specifies kedei bia, that it specifically pertains to intercourse, because presumably he can seduce her in public. So in other words, typically this seductive component of a nightstand doesn't necessarily have to be done in private, and therefore it's not included in the length of time for seclusion. That's what it says kedei bia. If it would have says if it says kedei bia, the amount of time of intercourse, havamini kedei gemar bia, meaning a complete act of intercourse. Penetration followed by what do you call it, climax and orgasm.
This is going to be a precious bottle.
No, that's it. Done. In other words, the complete act of intercourse. It's not a complete act of intercourse. It's just the initial act. And what is the definition of a raw? So if you remember from Yomis, there is there's a machlokes how to define hara. According to one opinion, hara is sort of the act of them of their genitalia touching, and the other opinion is that hara is literally the first instant of penetration. That's it. So obviously, the amount of time we're taking here, the amount of time necessary for this act of intercourse is extremely small. If we just said hara, havmin kedei hara v'artzusa. If we would have just spoke about the initial act of intercourse, I would think it's the initial act plus the seduction to get there. It needs to be it has to be the carnal act, an act of intercourse, and just for the initial act, meaning there's nothing else except for the initial act. Okay, and how long does that take? The amount of time it takes to circle a tree. Now we have another brayso here that's very similar, except that it pushes all the opinions. So every opinion says something else. One person off from the previous. So the previous brayso gave a whole list. First guy said walk right. It's Rabbi Shmuel says walking around the tree. Or Rabbi Elazar says pouring a cup. Rabbi Yeshua says to drink it. Let's see this brayso. Vinistra, there was a seclusion. Kamash v'kamashir stira. How long is the seclusion? Lo shamana. We don't know. When the Torah says she became tameh, they committed a carnal act together. Evidently it's kedei tumah. It's the length of time it takes for a carnal act. Kedei bia, kedei hara. It's just the initial carnal act. It's not a completion of the act, nor does it include the seduction. And how long is that? Kedei chazora stekel. Like the amount of time it takes for a palm tree to swing back and forth in the wind. Very small amount of time. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. Again, Rabbi Eliezer previously said it's the amount of time it takes to pour a cup. Rabbi Yeshua, in other words, the first opinion, instead of having Rabbi Shmuel saying it's to walk around the tree, the first opinion is Rabbi Eliezer that says it's the amount of time it takes for the tree to swing in the wind. Rabbi Yeshua in the previous brayso said kedei l'shtaisa, to drink it. Rabbi Yeshua over here says kedei mezigas hakais, the amount of time it takes to pour a cup. Ben Azai Aimer kedei l'shtaisa. Previously, in the previous brayso, Rabbi Azai says it's to roast an egg. Rabbi Kiva Aimer kedei litzas beya. Rabbi Kiva says to roast an egg. In the previous brayso, Rabbi Kiva said that to swallow an egg. Rabbi Yehudah ben Beseir Aimer kedei l'gaima, to swallow an egg. Rabbi Yehudah ben Beseir in the previous brayso says to swallow 3 eggs. It appears to us that circling a tree and circling a palm tree and a palm tree swinging in the wind, it takes approximately an equal amount of time.
Please, Rabbi.
Fourth wide line. In the first brayso, Rabbi Shmuel says to circle a tree. And Rabbi Eliezer disagrees, and he says it's to pour a cup. And over here, Rabbi Eliezer says it's for the palm tree to swing back and forth. So Amar Abaye says no. Hakafa is to walk around it. Apparently, it takes a little bit longer than to swing in the tree, to swing in the wind. Rav Ashi asks, so is it to swing back and forth from right to left, or is it until it centers itself? So it's as soon as the scintillation stops and it stands firm. Okay, so where is his takeaway? It's unclear. Okay, now the Gemara says, okay, so we know that walking around a tree and swinging a tree in the wind, it's a different length of time. Okay, we have a different problem here. Hassam, the first brayso, Amar Rabbi Elazar kedei mezigas hakais, the amount of time it takes to pour a glass. But over here he says for a tree to swing. Gemara says idi b'idi chatshiur. It's the same amount of time. Okay, hold on. Hassam Amar Rabbi Yeshua kedei l'shtaisa. In the first brayso, Rabbi Yeshua says to drink a cup. Hacha Amar kedei mezigas hakais. Over here it says to pour a cup. Gemara says ema kedei limzei v'lishtais. The amount of time it takes to pour and drink a cup. Let's say that drinking a cup and pouring it are the same length of time. So Gemara says, Imkain, Haina Rabbi Elazar. If that's the case, that's the same opinion as Rabbi Eliezer, who says that pouring a cup and swinging in the wind is the same amount of time. So obviously, Rabbi Yeshua has a different opinion. It's to pour and drink a cup. So it's a significantly longer amount of time. Okay. Hasam Amar Ben Azai kedei litzas beitza. In the first brayso, Ben Azai says to grill an egg, to roast an egg. Hacha Amar, but over here he says kedei l'shtaisa, to drink it. in other words, to drink a cup. So Gemara says roasting an egg and drinking a cup, it's all one, it's all one time period. It's the same amount of time. Okay, Hasam Amar Rabbi Kiva Kedei Legoimo. The first brayso, Rabbi Kiva says to swallow an egg. Hacha Amar Kedei Litzis Beitza. Over here he says to roast an egg. So Gemara says Em Kedei Litzis Beitza V'Legoimo, meaning to roast and to swallow an egg. So this is like a very large chunk of time. We've gone from like the 2.5 seconds to now we're at probably 45 seconds to a minute, maybe even longer. Maybe both of them are the same thing. The Gemara says, if roasting an egg and swallowing an egg took the same amount of time, that would be the same opinion of Ben Azai, who says roasting an egg and drinking a cup is the same amount of time. Right? If A equals B and B equals C, then C equals A, right? Which effectively would be the case if Rabbi Kiva would say that the roasting egg and swallowing it were the same thing, right? So then it's A equals B, B equals C. Okay. The first brayso, Rabbi Yehudah says swallowing 3 eggs. Over here it says to swallow 1 egg. So Gemara says the dvar of Rabbi Kiva Kamar. He's just arguing with Rabbi Kiva. He says you measure roasting and swallowing. And his response is no. What he says is you could also give a measurement of time just with regard to swallowing 3 eggs, which also happens to be the same amount of time as roasting and swallowing a single egg. So he does, in effect, he does agree with Rabbi Kiva, this last opinion, and he's just giving an alternative way to quantify Rabbi Kiva's opinion. Okay. Rabbi Elazar ben Yirmiyah said, to tie the threads of a loom. Rav Ashi had the following question: the merachik or the mekarev? Were they distant or were they close? And the Gemara's resolution is teku, let it stand. It's not clear whether these are. In other words, is this a difficult job or is this a very close job? It goes much faster. It's the amount of time it takes to use a toothpick to pull a splinter out of between her teeth. And of course, the obvious question is, Rav Ashi asks, the mahadik or the loy mahadik? Is it tightly in between the teeth or is it loose? And the Gemara resolves, teku, let it stand. Plima says, to pull a bread out of a basket. Hold on a second. Rav Ashi, the mahadik or the loy mahadik? Is it like stuffed into the basket? We have to move everything to the side or not? The chadata, is it a fresh loaf of bread? Or is it an old loaf? Okay. An old loaf apparently is smoother. It's easier to hold. Whereas one second, hold on. I'm sorry. Are we talking about a basket that's new or a basket that's old? So in a new basket, there's a lot of splinters. So the splinters can easily hold on to the bread. It would be much more difficult to pull it out. But if it's an old basket, it's worn down already, so it's much smoother, and bread won't get stuck. Much easier to pull it out. Bekrira bechamimo. Is it cold or is it hot? If it's hotter, you might think a little bit before you take it out, and you might be careful when you take it out. B'dechiti abidesari. Is it made out of wheat or is it made out of barley? Apparently, barley bread, which I've never had, apparently is much more difficult to handle because it's much rougher. And I'm sorry, the contrary. Because it's rougher, it's easier to carry. A loaf of wheat bread is much smoother, so it can slip. Rakika ibakusha. Was it a soft bread or was it baked with a much more? Was it soft dough, a liquid dough, or was it liquid batter, or is it a dough? Again, presumably here the batter will probably be more difficult to hold on to, like a piece of cake. You're like holding a cake. You have to be careful how you pull it out, especially if it's tight. And there might be splinters. It'll take a little while to pull it out. Whereas if you're taking out, presumably not in a pan, and if you're taking out a stiff loaf of bread, it's probably much easier to remove. The Gemara's response is, teku, let it stand.
They're having a real good set of resolutions.
Yes. Here's a very good question, by the way, if anyone was thinking of this question. Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef says, in the name of Rabbi Yechon, Kol echad ba'atzmi shir. So how does everybody know how long it takes? The obvious answer is because every person here was married. Hold on a second, but one of them wasn't. Va'ika ben Azai. Ben Azai was not married to Lein Osif. So the Gemara says, Ibai Sema, one opinion is, now how do we know Ben Azai wasn't married? So if you remember, we learned in Masechtas Yevomis that Ben Azai said about himself that his soul was in love with Torah. So he was not able to relate to women. So according to one opinion, is Nasav Pirush. He got married, but he couldn't handle a love affair with a woman, so he ended up splitting up. The Ibai Sema me Rabbi Shmuel. Another opinion is he heard it from his Rebbe. The Ibai Sema Sod Hashem Lireav, that the secret is to God, those that fear God. In other words, that he knows the secret even if he wasn't married. It's interesting. I'm not sure if it was Ben Azai or Ben Zayma. One of them married the daughter of Rabbi Kiva. If you remember the story of Rabbi Kiva, which we saw in Yevomis as well, Rabbi Kiva went to learn for 24 years, right? And apparently his daughter let her husband learn forever. And his daughter did not have any children. The Gemara says that the mother was, she gave 24 years. Obviously, he had at least one daughter with her, but the daughter gave him everything, and she didn't have any kids. Okay. Okay. Darish Rabbi Vira. Rabbi Vira taught Zimnin Amr La Mishmei Rav Ami. Sometimes he quoted Rav Ami, but Zimnin Amr La Mishmei Rav Asi, and sometimes he quoted Rav Asi as a source for this idea. Kol Oichel Lechem B'Loi Netilas Yadayim. One who eats bread without washing his hands, it's as if he has a relationship with a harlot. Because of a prostitute until a loaf of bread. Hold on a second. Amar Rava says, "Hi ba'ad isha zayna." It seems as if the cause here is the prostitute. Ad kikar lachem, ba'ad kikar lachem. 1 second. In other words, you're presuming here the pasuk seems to indicate that it's the cause of the zayna, not the loaf of bread. Because if it were the cause of the loaf of bread, it should say ba'ad kikar lechem ad isha zayna, because of a loaf of bread until a prostitute. Meaning, if one treats the halachas of eating bread lightly, he doesn't wash his hands, then it would be as if he was with a prostitute. No. But the verse here is the opposite. It seems as if the loaf of bread is the result of being with a prostitute. Somebody who has an affair with a prostitute, eventually he will become impoverished and will be seeking out a loaf of bread. Amr of Zrika, Amr of Elazar. Zrika says in the name of Elazar, somebody who's lenient with the laws of Netilas Yadayim, he's uprooted from the world. He's killed. Amr of Chia Barashi, Amr Rav. Rav Chia Barashi said, okay, and the reason for this is because it is a violation of a rabbinical law, and the Shlomo HaMelech teaches in Koheles Ecclesiastes, Peretz Geder Ishchenu Nochash, someone who breaks a fence, a snake will bite him, and by being extremely lenient in the laws of Netilas Yadayim, a snake will bite him. In other words, he will lose his life. Amar of Chia Barashi, Amar Rav. Chia Barashi says in the name of Rav, Mayim Rishayim Tzarech Sheyagbia Yadav L'Mala. When one washes Netilas Yadayim, he has to lift his hands upwards, and I'll explain this in a moment. Mayim Achronim Tzarech Sheyashbel Atzma Sheyashbel Yadav L'Mata. When a person pours Mayim Achronim at the end of a meal, he leans his hands downward, and we'll explain in a moment. Tanya Nabi Hachi. We learned this as well in a brayso. Hanotel Yadav, somebody who's washing his hands, Tzarech Sheyagbia Yadav L'Mala. He has to lift his hands upwards. Because water might go outside of the parak. We'll explain that in a moment. And they'll come back and they'll make the hands tummy. Okay, so let's explain this for a moment. We'll go with Mayim Achronim first because it's a little bit easier. What's the purpose of Mayim Achronim? Why do you have to wash your hands at the end of the meal before you veg?
Little acids or something.
Melat sadimus. So there's some sort of salt of sadaim, and if you lick it or touch your orifices with it, it can cause either illness or death. So you have to remove this salt. Now today we don't know if it's such a salt. We're unaware of the salt of sadaim, and therefore today, Mayim Achronim, the consensus of most poskim is that it is not a halacha. One is not obligated to wash Mayim Achronim. However, there's a separate discussion here, which is that when the laws of Mayim Achronim and Mayim Rishonim were enacted, there was a Kabbalistical significance to that event. It wasn't just a matter of practical importance. A heavenly voice rang out. Okay, it's complicated. Anyway, so Kabbalistically, there's still significance to washing your hands at the end of the meal, and therefore it's a noble practice, but it's not an obligation. Okay, Now, when you want to, let's theoretically say that there's the salt on your hands, the salt of Sodom, so you want it to run off the hands. So you want your hands to be tilted downward so that it runs right off. That's the easy one. Mayim Rishayim. Now we get to Netilas Yadayim. What's the purpose of Netilas Yadayim? How do you wash Netilas Yadayim? So you wash twice on each hand, one, two, and then 1, 2 on the other hand. Why twice? Or why are you washing your hands in the first place? And the answer is because the rabbis enacted a law, and they considered all hands to be shniyos, to be a second level of tumah. And therefore, in order to prevent the tumah from getting to the foods, you have to wash your hands. Now again, because it's a rabbinic enactment, they said as follows: the first time you wash your hands, the tumah goes from your hands into the water. So now you have tamei water. And the second time you wash, so again, you're pouring once, you remove the tumah from your hand, but there's still, your hand is now wet. The water contains tumah. And when you wash a second time, you purify the water, the tamei water on your hands, and that runs off. And now your hands are wet. But that's what I'm saying, you have to dry your hands also. We'll get to that in a moment. But now your hands are tahar, and the water on your hands is also tahar. And this is sort of a 1-2 process, obviously, because otherwise the water would make your hands tamei. Tamei water would make your hands tamei normally. And therefore, if you do it one after another, in quick succession, whatever, second apart, 2 seconds, whatever it is, then that purifies your hands. Now, let's imagine somebody washes his hands, let's say up till, demonstration here, up till here, right? The first time. So this area from here, all the water from here to here is all tamei water now. Let's say the next time he washes his hands only, let's say till here. Middle of the palm covers the thumb as well, right? So he's sort of like this. So now we have a problem here. This side of the hand is completely tar, including the water that's on it. This water is tamei water, right? And if it should happen that before he dries his hands, he puts his hands down or something, and the water from the upper part of the hand rolls downwards, the lower part of the hand. So now it makes his hand tamei again. So therefore, one should lift his hands and make sure that whatever he washed with the first washing is also washed with the second washing. Or alternatively, the main component of washing is the perak. What's the perak? Halacha, the perak is this. It's the knuckles. So it would be something like this area. That's the minimum. Now some say the perak is the wrist. So you'd wash until here, and obviously if you're able to, you should lechatchila do that. And obviously on Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av, when you wash your hands in the morning, the perak is the more lenient opinion, or in that case, the more stringent opinion. It's less of the hand and more of the hands, right? Okay.
I
What?
was thinking dry food becomes tamei. Food could not be tamei.
We're talking about washing for bread. For food certainly can come down.
Okay,
So this is washing for bread.
right, the bread, so bread can become tamei.
So there's other foods could also come down. There's other types of washing, but principally the washing is for bread. Okay, now, again, so there's two solutions. Number one is to make sure that whatever you wash with the first time, you cover with the second time. And the second thing, or the other alternative, is to keep your hands like this, make sure it doesn't run down, and then dry them. So if you dry them, you remove the tamei water, which is not part of the obligation, right? You don't wash your arm, you just wash the perak. That's the knuckles and lower. So the other part, if you dry it off, the fact that it's tamei doesn't make a difference. It's not the part you're eating with, it's fine. And that's why when you wash your hands should be upwards to make sure that you cover whatever was covered by the first cup of water, or the first pour is covered by the second pour as well. And B, that even if it wasn't, as long as your hands are upright and it doesn't fall downward, you don't have to wash again. You could just dry it off in that position and you'll be fine.
What about the towel for the neck?
So once it becomes absorbed, if the towel is wet to the point where it's you squeeze it and water drips out of it, that might be a problem. But if it's dry, then there's no tumah. So even if it's moist, in general, the tumah would only be when it's in a liquid state, or it will be so wet that it's oozing liquid. Okay, so that explains the gemara. Okay, now we get to drying your hands. If somebody eats bread without drying his hands, it's as if he's eating bread that's impure, and this might be a little bit for in our era today. Shenemar, as the pasuk states, Vayomer Hashem, and Hashem told him, Kocha yochlu b'nei Yisrael es lachmam tamei. This is God talking to Yecheskel. So shall the Jewish people eat their bread tamei. Now it doesn't tell you how Yecheskel made his breads, so I'll have the privilege of telling you that in a moment here. Where is it? Where's the full explanation? Hold on a moment. I can't remember where it's on the same one. Hold on a second. One second. No, I saw this. I believe this. Hold on a second. So just pull up the original pasuk. Where's the same? Yeah, okay. So basically, hold on. Okay, so basically Hashem tells Yecheskel to make a cake of bread, but to bake it with human excrement. And then the prophecy is that you show them this bread and you tell them that this is how they will eat their bread, tamei. So you see here that something that's more, something that's disgusting is called tamei. And therefore, if somebody's hands are still moist and they're eating bread, so it sort of ruins the bread. It's as if he's eating the bread when it's tamei. Because you see here, tamei is synonymous with disgust. Okay, 1 second. My ve'eshes ish nefesh yikar totzid, and what's the end of the pasuk? A ve'eshes ish, a married woman, nefesh yikar totzid, she will ensnare a nefesh yikar, a privileged soul. What does that mean? Amar of Chibar Rabba, Amar of Yechanan. Chibar Rabba explains the name of Yechanan. Call Adam sheyesh begasis haruach, anyone who is haughty. Ultimately, he will sin with a married woman. A married woman, nefesh yikara. What does a privileged soul mean? It means somebody who considers himself haughty. Totzad, she will ensnare him. Amrova high nefesh yikara gavoya mi ba'ilei. Yikar is precious, privileged. Over here, it should be nefesh gavoya, a haughty person. What does the word yikar mean? Why is the word yikar used? She will ensnare him. Rava offers an alternative explanation. Anyone who has an affair with a married woman, even if he's a nefesh that studied Torah, a soul that engaged in Torah study, which is called yikar, precious. Yikar, what does it mean? It's precious. A person who studies Torah is at a higher level in Torah study than the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. he's more precious. He's considered more privileged than even the Kohen Gadol. Even if he studies Torah, this sin will pursue him and will ensnare him to end up in Gehenna, the punishment of whatever, purgatory. Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Shemar Chai. So now, and including much of tomorrow, we will be discussing the dangers of haughtiness and the blessing of humility. Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Shimon Chai, Kol Adam sheyesh begas ruach, anyone who's haughty, proud, it's as if he worships idols. The verse states, Toyavas Hashem kol gvalev. The disgust of God is anyone who holds himself haughty. Uksiv hasam, and it says elsewhere, don't bring a disgusting item to'eva into your house, in reference to idol worship. So you see here that to'eva, disgust, is compared to both someone who's proud and haughty and somebody who worships idols. Rabbi Yochanan himself said, it's as if he denies everything. Shenemar, as the verse states, your heart will become haughty, become too proud of itself. And then what happens? You become an atheist. Yeah, there's an intrinsic link over there. If anyone knows any of the atheists, this is a common trait. Rav Chama bar Chanina says, it's as if he had an affair with all the list of prohibited relationships. God calls the haughty Toyavas Hashem, the disgust of God. And with regard to the forbidden relationships, the verse states, the list of all these prohibited relationships are called Toyeva, disgust. Ula says, it's as if he built a temple, an altar for idol worship. Shenemar, remove yourself from man, whose neshama is in his nose. This means somebody who's very proud and walks with his nose up. Because what's he worth? Al tikri bameh elaboma, because elaboma nechshafu, he's considered an altar for idol worship. The conclusion of the verse is, my yod li yod lo yanaka. A hand to a hand will not be cleaned. In other words, even if he has the benefit of the yod li yod, of a hand to a hand, lo yanaka, he won't be cleaned from the sin of haughtiness, of being proud. So what does that mean? What does it mean yod li yod lo yanaka? What exactly is a hand to a hand? What's that a reference to? Amar Rav explained, Kol abal eishes. Hold on a moment. Anyone who has an affair with a married woman, even if God has given him Shemayim, heaven and earth, like Avram. What does it say by Avram? Yodi el Hashem. I lift my hand to Hashem, El Elyon, the master of the universe, Kaina Shemayim v'aretz, who owns the heavens and earth. So even if God gives him, like Avram, he gives him his head, Avram that said Yad, and God gave him heaven and earth, he still will not be saved from the sin of sleeping with a married woman. That will not save him from Gehenna. Sheila had the following question. Hi, Yod liyod lo yanaka, yod mi ba'ilay. Yod liyod means a hand to a hand. Now it's true that Avraham Avinu said yodi, he used the word hand, but so then the verse, if that was the verse's reference, it should say yodi lo yanaka. What does a hand to a hand mean? Yod liyod. It doesn't seem like it's a reference to Avraham Avinu. It must be a reference to something else. So Rav Shila proposed an alternative. I feel a kibel Torah k'Moshe Rabbeinu. So Moshe Rabbeinu, sort of his hand receives the luchos from God. So you have like a hand to a hand. That he receives the Torah from God, in God's right hand. He won't be saved from the punishment of Gehenna. Because, in other words, from the sin of sleeping with a married woman. Rav Yochanan had the following question. Hi yod liyod. Yod mi yod mi bai. This is not a hand to a hand. This is Moshe Rabbeinu receiving from God's hand. So it's actually, even if somebody is as great as Moshe that received from God's hand. So it's a yod mi yod, a hand that received from another hand. And Rav Yochanan proposes the final alternative. Afilu oiset tzedakah b'seiser. A hand-to-hand means the gift of providing charity privately. I guess we could pitch the Federation drive. If anyone can volunteer at 10:30 to go help out, and can message John Perrin as well. That's the mitzvah of tzedakah b'seiser, or giving charity privately. Matan b'seiser yichapa af. A private charitable gift will push away. It will postpone anger. In other words, even if God is angry at somebody, the gift of giving the merit of giving charity privately will postpone that anger. But it will not postpone the anger. It won't postpone the punishment of sleeping with a married woman. Lo yinaka medina shel Gehenna. Will not save him from the judgment of Gehenna. Okay, and tomorrow the Gemara will deal with this, the punishment of Gehenna for those that for the haughty and the proud. It's most of tomorrow. Okay, great day. And see everybody at 2:30. Right over here, at this very table.
Advanced seating or open festival seating kind of thing.
No, whatever you want.
You don't want to get
Oh,
trampled.
is it here or is it?
Right here.
Oh,
Right here.
You mean here? So
Exactly, right at this table.
There was something with respect to that, something if they're wet.
Yeah, okay, so
But if they're dry.
in general, I didn't want to get into that, but
Oh,
yes,
okay.
there really is a second obligation to wash your hands. And that is if you're eating wet fruits and vegetables. So if you wash an apple, you should dry it before you eat it. Before you eat it with your hands. Maybe if you eat it with a fork, it might be different. But certainly if you're eating it with your hands and you're eating an apple like this, you should dry the apple before you consume it. Yeah.
All right.
Uh,
Cleared that up.